There is a rule for growing money that is so boring, so unbearably dull, that almost no one has the patience to follow it. And precisely that, is why it works. It is the single place my grandfather quietly put his money and let it grow for over 40 years. And in that time, following one plain patient, almost embarrassing rule, he quietly left behind nearly every clever, confident, expensive investor he ever met. Not with a hot tip, not with a secret, with the most boring rule in the entire world of money. I am going to give it to you today exactly as he gave it to me, and I am warning you now, your first reaction will be to feel let down by how simple it is. Stay with me anyway, because that feeling of being let down is the very trap that keeps almost everyone poor. My name is Daiki. I am 28 years old, and everything I have taught you on this channel, saving your first 10,000, killing your debt, waking up the money that was asleep in the bank, all of it has been walking, quietly, toward this one video. Because this is where the money finally goes to grow. If this channel has genuinely helped you, take 1 second and subscribe, because this is the piece that ties every other piece together, and I do not want you to miss it. Now let me tell you about the boring rule. Let me paint you a picture first, because you have met these people, and the contrast is the whole lesson. Think of the confident one, the friend, the coworker, the loud voice online, who is always in the middle of something exciting. He has the hot stock this month. He has the coin that is about to explode. He watches the charts. He makes the clever trades. He talks about the market like a man who has cracked a code. And for a while sometimes, he wins and he tells everyone loudly. And then the tide turns, as it always does, and he goes quiet, and next year there is a new hot thing and a new story. Now, next to him, picture my grandfather. He had no hot stock. He had no story to tell at dinner. He never once watched a chart in his life. He did something so boring that the confident man would have laughed at him. And 40 years later, it was not close. It was not remotely close. The quiet man had built a fortune. The confident man had built a collection of stories. That is the difference between these two ways of handling money, and I am about to show you exactly why the boring way wins. So here is the rule, in its plain parts, and I promise you all of it fits in a few honest sentences. The first part is this: you do not try to pick the one winning plant. You buy the entire field. Now let me explain what I mean, because this is the piece that frees you from a lifetime of stress. Most people believe that investing means guessing correctly which single company will win, which stock will soar. And that is a game that even the highly paid professionals, with their teams and their screens and their fancy degrees, lose at over and over. So my grandfather refused to play it. Instead of trying to guess the one winning company, he bought a tiny slice of all of them at once, the whole market, the entire field, in a single, simple, low-cost basket. There is a plain name for this basket today, and you can buy it in minutes. When you own the whole field, you never have to be right about which plant grows tallest, because you own every plant. Some will fail, some will soar, and across the whole field, across the long years, the field itself has always grown. You stop gambling on one, and you quietly own everything. The second part is this: you buy it steadily, a little at every payday, in the good times and the frightening times alike. And you never ever try to guess the perfect moment. This is where the payday ritual I taught you finally comes home. Remember, you pay yourself first, off the top. Well, this is where a piece of that money now goes. Automatically, every single month, buying a little more of the whole field, whether the news is cheerful or whether the whole world seems to be ending. Because here is the truth that the exciting people cannot accept. Nobody, not one person alive, not the smartest investor who ever breathed, can reliably guess the perfect moment to buy. So you stop trying. You simply buy a little, always forever. When prices are low, your steady money quietly buys more. When they are high, it buys less. And over the years, without you making a single clever decision, it all averages out in your favor. And you were never once stressed about the timing, because timing was never your job. The third part, and do not skip this one, because it is the poor tax all over again, wearing a new suit. You keep the cost as close to nothing as you possibly can. Here is what almost no one understands. When you invest, there are people, funds, advisors, clever products, all eager to take a small yearly slice of your money, 1 or 2%, for the privilege of managing it. And that small slice sounds harmless. It is the exact same compounding thief we met when we talked about debt, only now it is nibbling your growth instead of your savings every year, for decades. 1 or 2%, taken every year for 40 years, can quietly eat a third or more of everything you would have had. So my grandfather chose the plainest, cheapest possible basket, the one that charges almost nothing, and he kept nearly all of his own growth for himself. Cheap and boring beats expensive and clever almost every single time, and the reason is the fee, quietly compounding against you in the dark. Let me make that real, because 1 or 2% still sounds like almost nothing. Imagine two people who invest the very same money into the very same field for 40 years. The only difference between them is that one pays a 2% yearly fee to a clever manager, and the other pays almost nothing at all. At the end of those 40 years, the one who paid that small, harmless sounding fee can walk away with something like a third less money than the one who did not. A third of everything. Gone, not to a crash, not to a single bad decision, but quietly, painlessly, to a little number that sounded like nothing the day he agreed to it. That is the poor tax of investing, and the plain cheap basket is simply how you refuse for the rest of your life to pay it. And the fourth part is the hardest, and it is the one that separates the people who talk about wealth from the people who actually build it. You hold. You hold for decades, and when the market falls, and I promise you it will fall, sometimes frighteningly, you do not sell. You do nothing, you let it fall, and you keep quietly buying, and you wait because you understand that a fall is not the money disappearing. It is the whole field going on sale. My grandfather lived through more than one time when the value of what he owned dropped hard, and everyone around him panicked and sold at the worst possible moment, locking in their losses forever. He did not. He simply held on, and he kept adding, and every single time the field eventually recovered and grew on past where it had ever been. Time, not cleverness, does the real work, and the one thing that ruins it is the human hand, reaching for the sell button in a moment of fear. I want to tell you about the worst of those falls, because I watched it happen with my own eyes. There was a year when I was still young, when the whole world seemed to be quietly coming apart, and the value of everything my grandfather owned dropped, and dropped, and dropped again, until on paper it had lost a great and frightening part of what it had been worth. I remember the mood in the neighborhood. I remember the men who sold everything they had in a panic to stop the bleeding, who swore white-faced that they were done with all of it, forever. And then I remember my grandfather, calm at his low table, doing the one thing that looked completely insane to every frightened person around him. He kept buying. A little more every single payday into the falling field, while the whole world ran the other way. And he said something to me in that time that I have never once forgotten. He said, "The field is not gone, boy. It has simply gone on sale, and everyone is far too frightened to shop." Within a few years, the field had not only climbed back, it had grown far, far past where it began. And the money he had bravely, boringly added, during the very worst of the fear, had grown the most of all. The panicked men who sold never made their way back. He simply never left. Now, here's the part that should genuinely change how you see all of this. And it is not my opinion. It is one of the most studied truths in the entire world of money. You would think that the highly paid professionals, the experts who do this all day, would easily beat this boring little basket. They do not. Over the long years, the great majority of them, the clever, expensive, confident professionals, fail to beat the simple, boring index that just quietly owns the whole field. Let that land for a moment. The boring rule does not merely keep pace with the experts. After their fees, it beats most of them, over time. So when you follow this plain rule, you are not settling for something lesser. You are quietly choosing the thing that has, across the long history, outperformed the overwhelming majority of the people who get paid fortunes to try to do better. The boring path is not the amateur's path. It is, quietly, the winning one. So then, if the rule is this simple, why does almost no one follow it? And here is the answer, and it is the deepest thing I will say today. The enemy was never the market. The enemy is you. It is the fear that makes you sell when everything is falling and cheap. It is the greed that makes you pour in at the top when everything is soaring and expensive. It is the boredom that makes you abandon the slow working plan to go chase the exciting losing one. Every single part of the boring rule exists for one reason: to quietly remove you, your fear, your greed, your restless clever hands from the machine. You buy the whole field so you cannot agonize over picking. You buy automatically so you cannot agonize over timing. You keep it cheap so no one robs you slowly. And you refuse to sell so your own panic can never undo the years of patient work. The rule is not really about the market at all. It is about protecting your money from the most dangerous person who will ever touch it, which is you on a frightened day. Let me be straight with you now, more carefully than ever, because this is the video where I could do the most harm if I were careless. Nothing I am telling you is a promise, and none of it is personal advice for your exact life. The market is real, which means it truly falls, and when it falls, it will feel awful. And some years you will open the account and see less than you put in, and you will have to be strong. This is why every earlier video mattered. You never ever put your emergency money here The money that turns a disaster into a Tuesday, that stays safe and boring and reachable. Exactly where we left it. You only ever grow money you will genuinely not need for many long years, ideally 10 or more, because the boring rule needs time the way a tree needs time, and a tree pulled up every season to check the roots never grows at all. And you keep it broad and cheap and simple. The moment someone tries to sell you something exciting and complicated and expensive, you have my grandfather's permission, and mine, to walk away. But within those honest walls, the math of what patience builds is almost hard to believe. Picture it, a steady, small amount sent faithfully into the whole field every month and simply left alone to compound across 30 or 40 years. History cannot promise you any single year, but across the long stretch, that quiet, boring habit has turned ordinary monthly amounts, the kind a normal working person can manage, into sums that would genuinely astonish the version of you sitting here today. To put the roughest of numbers on it, and only ever as history, never once as a promise, a few $100s a month, sent faithfully into the whole field, and then left completely patiently alone, has across a working lifetime grown into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and for those who began young and simply never stopped, sometimes well past a single million, from ordinary monthly amounts, from nothing more than a boring rule and a great and rare deal of patience, not because you were clever, not because you guessed right, but because you owned the whole field, kept your costs near zero, never sold in fear, and let time do the one thing time does better than any genius alive. It is the seed and the forest, exactly as my grandfather described it to me. You do not grow a forest by frantically digging. You plant faithfully, and then you have the rare and quiet courage to wait. So here is what I want you to do this week. You do not need to understand everything. You only need to take the first small step, the way we always do. Find the plainest, cheapest, broadest basket of the whole market you can, the kind that owns a little of everything and charges almost nothing. Set up one small automatic amount to go into it every payday, an amount so small you will not feel it, the same as always. And then, and this is the important part, look away. Do not check it every day, do not watch the news and reach for the button. Plant it and let it be, and let the long years do their quiet work, exactly the way the secret envelope taught you. Small, steady, boring, forgotten. And one day, far from now, astonishing. That is how my grandfather did it. That is how my father did it. And it is still how it is done in any home that remembers. So tell me in the comments, what is the one thing that has always stopped you from starting? The fear, the not knowing how, the feeling that it was for other people. Say it out loud and let us take that fear away together. I read every one of them. And next time, I am going to tell you the one thing my grandfather said all of this money was actually for. Because he did not save, and refuse debt, and grow a forest for 40 years, in order to die as the richest man in the graveyard. There was a single quiet question underneath every rule I have ever taught you. A question that is deeply Japanese, and once you hear it, every single thing on this channel will finally make sense in a way it never has before. It is the most important thing I will ever tell you. I will see you then.